Hey and welcome. My name's Anthony Veltri, and today I'm going to share with you a step-by-step action plan that will show you how to stop living from paycheck to paycheck. We have a lot of learning objectives here, and the reason that this information is so important is because all of the other things that you will learn as a result of participating in the indispensable community are sort of predicated on the basis of the fact that you're not living from paycheck to paycheck. So it's really important that the information that we present here and that we're going to go over here is stuff that you are able to implement and able to master. Now, remember, you may have heard some of this information before, maybe presented in a different context, and rather than saying, I know that, when you hear something that you may have heard before, ask yourself instead, am I doing that? And if you hear something and you say, yeah, I know that, and I'm doing that, then challenge yourself to go a step further. And instead of just saying, yeah, I do that already, ask yourself what results you're getting from that. Once I learned this trick, it really forced me to go deeper in terms of not just knowing information, but actually applying that information. So I like to start off every presentation with that little piece of information because it really benefited me, and I hope it will benefit you as well. Next, recognize the importance of knowing your income, your debt, and your savings. Increase your awareness of frivolous spending and how to decrease and eliminate such spending. And additionally, a learning objective is to find sources of money that you can start saving now. Some additional learning objectives include an understanding the necessity of paying off your debt and discovering creative ways to earn extra money. Finally, you'll learn how to use part of your savings to erase debt and also see how following a budget can really benefit you. What we've seen on these past two slides here is basically two things. Number one is how to save money with a budget, but also how to earn additional income, because that's really where you're going to end up moving the needle for yourself, because you can only be so frugal, and that's only going to take you so far. Eventually, you will need to generate additional income if you really want to start moving the needle for you. So let's follow these 8 steps to stop living paycheck to paycheck pretty much forever. Step 1 is to acknowledge your current financial state. Step 2 is to know your monthly income and your debt totals. Step 3 is to cut excess spending today. Step 4 involves starting saving money this week. That's right. Start this week, potentially even today. Step 5 includes paying off your debt. Step 6 includes earning extra income however you can. I think step 6 is really, really important. It's so vital. A lot of people they focus on saving, but they don't focus on earning extra income. I think it's really vital. Step 7 is using half of your savings to pay off your debt. And step 8 is having a budget and sticking to it. Now, step 7 is a step that you may or may not want to use depending on your particular financial situation, but I wanted to include it because it's a basic piece of information to make sure that you're not living from paycheck to paycheck. Step 1, acknowledge your current financial state. In this step, we're basically going to go over how much money do you have right now. And what I mean by this is tally everything together and go through your couch cushions, go through your seat cushions, pull out all the coins, cash in all the soda bottles if you live in a state where you can redeem those things. Tally up all of your savings, your stocks, your CDs, all your cash, and figure out how much liquid assets you have right now in terms of what you could go and to the bank with and pay off bills, that sort of thing. The next step is to calculate your total amount of debt. And we're going to ask a question. What would happen if the next time you expected a paycheck, you didn't get it? If bad things would happen, then you can determine that you're pretty much living paycheck to paycheck at this point. And the thing is that you can have a better financial life even with your current income. And in order to do that, you need to change how you handle your money now to alter your financial existence. Step 2 is to know your income amount and what you're paying for each and every month. Now, this is a challenge, I understand, because a lot of times, and I know I'm guilty of this, I go out and I spend money on, sort of frivolous items. Maybe I'll go get a cup of coffee that I don't need, or maybe I'll go get a candy bar or something like that. These are things that are unbudgeted and unplanned for specifically. And a lot of times you can really see that there's money that's just going away spent on these sort of frivolous items. There's a really easy way to break this down, and it goes as follows. The first thing we want to do is check out what we have for incoming dollars, for incoming money. List all the money that comes into your household in a month. The next thing we want to do is calculate the outgoing dollars. Now, the next thing is to list everything that you pay in a month. This includes things like household bills, gas, car bills, things even like haircuts, entertainment, meals out, and maybe things such as medical or dental expenses. Now, in the basic math problem, we're going to subtract the incoming from the outgoing, and we're going to see if we end up with a positive or a negative number. So we're going to basically see if the result is a negative number, then you're spending more than you make. So basically, if your outgoing is more than your incoming, then you're a negative number and you're spending more than you make. Definitely not a good situation to be in. Now, many people are in the dark when it comes to money. And according to Suze Orman, she's going to turn on the lights. Now, I think Suze is a great public speaker, a great figure. I happen to disagree with her on a few particular issues, especially when it comes to taking on debt. But I think that this statement is absolutely true and absolutely correct in terms of people being in the dark when it comes to money. And here's the thing. I don't really think it matters who turns on the lights. I don't, if it's Susie, then that's fine. If it's somebody else, that's fine. If it's somebody in your life, that's fine. The critical thing is that there is light and that there is illumination and that you're no longer in the dark when it comes to your money. Step 3 is to cut excess spending today. And I do mean today. This is absolutely vital in terms of this process right here. What you want to do, it's a really basic process. The first thing that you do is record all your expenses for 7 days. And I do mean absolutely all of your expenses. The next step is to look at where you're writing this down. And you don't have to overcomplicate this. I mean, you don't need an Excel spreadsheet for this. You can just write it down in a notebook. And then look at that notebook and see where your frivolous spending patterns are, and then stop it. Decide which expenses you can cut from your monthly outgoing dollars and get rid of one monthly expense and reduce 2 others. Now, I realize that this may be different for some people. Some people may be able to get rid of 2 monthly expenses and reduce 3. But the bottom line is to take that action step and make that happen. And finally, this right here is keep the credit card with the lowest interest rate in your wallet. And if at all possible, don't use a credit card at all. And then keep doing this cycle. Keep repeating this cycle to constantly see where you can cut and how much you're able to cut from that. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to savings and budgeting, there will be a point where you have diminishing returns and you're just not able to cut things anymore. But for most people, you can do 2, maybe even 3, 4 cycles of this pattern here without actually cutting things too close to the bone. And it's actually, we actually went through 3 cycles right here before we decided that things were getting, that our way of life was suffering a little bit too much. But I tell you what, you go through this cycle 2 or 3 times and you look back 21 days later and you see all the places where you are basically hemorrhaging money and you never want to go back and do that again. Step 4 is to start saving money this week. And I do mean this week. So basically, what you do right here is every day you place your leftover change in a jar. And if you didn't get change that day, you can place a $1 bill in a jar. You think of that as a jar or piggy bank, something of that nature. And I realize that this is a small amount, it may be a token amount, but it's the act of saving and it's the act of doing it that's going to build upon itself. And the next step right here is to deposit that into a monthly deposit into your bank or credit union. Now, you can make this deposit toward the month ends, that's fine. And no matter how much you've accrued, put it in the bank every month. The next step is to save the $5 from grocery money or whatever you spend on eating out and establish the habit of paying yourself with that no matter what. And place that $5 in the bank along with the change every month. And so basically, if you pick one day a week to pay yourself $5, this is a very, very easy way to make sure that you do have some savings and that you are paying yourself and taking care of yourself first. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, this seems very simple, and it is in fact very simple, which is why so many people ignore it. We tend to focus on the complex and we tend to ignore the easy solutions to things. Additionally, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, it is so vital if you want to make yourself more resilient and become more self-reliant that you make sure you're not living paycheck to paycheck. That's why I think this presentation is really important, and it's something that I think you should strive to master as you move forward in your preparedness. Step 5 is to begin paying off your debt. Now, a real secret to stopping living paycheck to paycheck is to reduce your debt so you'll have cash if you need it. And when you get down to business and pay off your debt, this is going to be the toughest step. It's going to be the most important aspect, however, of liberating yourself. Now, the basic process for this is to list your debts and decide which you'll pay off first. You can use half of your savings account money along with the amount you'll normally pay toward the debt to apply toward the targeted debt. And so what happens is this process goes faster than you think because what you're doing is you're focusing on one specific debt, and it could be the debt that is the highest, or it could be the one that has the highest percentage rate for interest payments. And you have to decide which is more advantageous to be paid off first. And you just attack that debt, and you just continue to attack that debt while you're changing your habits in terms of paying yourself first and reducing your monthly expenses. And very quickly, you'll see that those, not only will the debts go down, but your savings will go up. And that will create and reinforce the habit of not only paying down the debt, but also saving, which is very, very powerful. So here is a quote from Ron Lewis, and I'll read it for you. It says, "It is incumbent upon each of us to improve spending and savings practices to ensure our own individual financial security and preserve the collective economic well-being of our great society." Now, right here is a quote that I actually prefer a lot more. And it's by Thomas Jefferson, and it goes something like this. "It is incumbent on every generation to pay its own debts as it goes, a principle which, if acted on, would save one half the wars of the world." So, as we can see from these two quotes, this is something that impacts us at every scale. It impacts us at a personal scale, and it also impacts us in terms of our nation and also our communities. So I think it's really important stuff to pay attention to. Step 6 is to earn extra income however you can. This is what we focus on here at Undispensable. This is absolutely our bread and butter. This is what we help individuals with day in and day out in terms of examining all of your skills and abilities with an open mind. And I have to tell you that I have yet to come across someone who does not have a skill that they can make additional income with. Here's the thing. All of the things that you think come easy to you, that you feel come easy to you, there are people out there who struggle to do those very same things. And so, if we can show you how to package those skills in a way that the people who want those skills are willing to pay you for them and are happy to pay you for them, then everybody's happy because now you're getting extra income and that person is getting the answers that they need. You would be pleasantly surprised to learn that people will pay you to do those services for them or to provide that information for them. Absolutely true. I did not believe it myself until I started putting the information that I had out there in a way that could be easily consumed and paid for, and changed my life. So read on to follow the strategies that are going to lead you to financial freedom. So here are some really, really basic ways to earn extra cash. As I said before, we go into this in great detail in terms of online, in terms of scaling this. But this is the very basic, lowest level of things that you could do to earn some additional cash for yourself. You could advertise your skills in a local newspaper. And in fact, I would suggest Craigslist or potentially even eBay over that. Because you don't have to pay anything for the Craigslist listing. Of course, the eBay fee would have some, but generally less expensive than a local newspaper. You can also use your talents or skills to help the elderly for pay, or, just your neighbor who maybe is, a little bit older. Maybe they don't want to mow their lawn. Maybe they need a little bit of help around the house getting groceries or something like that. Help them out with that. Finally, connect with your network to seek work. Here's the most critical thing right here is connecting with your network. There are so many people that we help here at Undispensable who feel very isolated until we start talking about their network and how they can leverage that network. And I'll break it down for you really, really simply. The first thing that I do before I even want to know what somebody's talents and skills are is I tell them to take a sheet of paper and put a line down the middle of that sheet of paper. And on the left-hand side of that sheet of paper, I want them to list the 20 most influential people that they know. And on the right side of that sheet of paper, I want them to list a challenge or a problem that they know that that individual is going to be facing that they can help them solve. And this is really, really informative. I encourage you to go about doing that because once you get to the list of 20 people, you very rapidly find that you have more than 20 people who you can solve a problem for. Really powerful. But as I said, this diagram here is just at the base level. Another quote from Benjamin Franklin, "Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise." Step 7. Use half and save the other half of your savings. So basically, apply half toward the debt you're paying off. Let's talk for a couple minutes about how to manage your savings. So you can apply half of your total savings toward the debt you're paying off, in addition to the payment you'd normally make. This really helps to accelerate how fast you're paying off your debt. And what you're going to do with the other half is you're going to leave the other half of your savings in the bank to accrue and to build upon itself. Now, we know that interest rates right now are abysmally low in terms of the interest that you'd accrue on your savings. Do not let that get in your way. Do not let that discourage you because you're putting this money aside as an emergency fund. And let me just tell you that this money is something that takes very little effort to put aside. And once you see a couple of months go by and you see that that's built up, you wonder how it built up. It didn't hurt to take that money and put it there, but all of a sudden you have this money that's been accruing, and it's very powerful. It's a very powerful thing indeed. So how to continue saving? So in this emergency fund, you want to save enough for your 6-month emergency fund. So begin with 3 to 6 months in your emergency fund. And what that basically is going to do is that will cover your basic minimum living expenses, which of course you've calculated already in the first steps of this process, to figure out what your minimum savings amount would be, or your minimum expense amount would be to carry you through for 6 months. In case something bad happened, you would be able to have 6 months of buffer time to figure out your situation, get yourself back on your feet before you started, either having to move or having to sell additional, sell your house or sell your car or something like that. The next thing you want to do is put aside $500 for a mini crisis. So if something unforeseen occurs, you'll be ready. Repairs on the house, repairs on the car, maybe some unexpected medical bills. Put that aside and don't touch it except for that predetermined mini crisis that hopefully never happens and that money just sits there forever. Now, ensure that you replace any money you use for a mini crisis by continuing to bank your change. Remember, that process that we set up earlier is something that's going to allow us to perpetuate and sort of top off these funds that we have right here. Now, later, as we progress with this, you can start something like a new car fund or a vacation fund or something of that nature as we progress. But make sure you get the basic stuff down first and you commit to mastery of that basic stuff before you start getting more complicated. Now, this is where it gets really powerful, when you increase the amount you save whenever you can. Now, whenever you get a raise, or I don't like to think of raises because raises are dependent on someone else. I like to be able to create a raise for myself by by earning additional income. But whenever you get the opportunity to either earn additional income or get a raise, boost your savings amount weekly by at least 80% of the amount of the raise or the amount of the additional income. Now, here's where the power really starts to come in. Because when you pay a bill off, continue to pay your savings account at least half of the payment to the bill. So pay your savings account the whole payment if you have other debts to pay off, so the money can be applied towards your remaining debt. This is really powerful, and this is really where that compounding starts to take place. Next, you need to make sure that you draw up a budget and you stick to it. Find a budget you like, use realistic figures when drawing up your budget, and make sure that you review your budget and your expenditures often. Just make sure that you are in charge of your finances and that you know exactly what's going on with your money. Just because you have a budget doesn't mean that you can't do the things that you like to do. A budget is actually going to empower you and enable you to do the things that you can't do right now, believe it or not. The art of living easily as to money is to pitch your scale of living 1 degree below your means. Now, when I first heard this, it was not particularly appealing to think about living below one's means. The way we're raised in our society, always keeping up with the Joneses, always making sure you have the latest, this, that, or the other thing. But I have to be honest, and I have to say that when we moved across country, we bought the least expensive house that we could afford. Not the most expensive. We bought the least expensive house that we looked at. Out of all the houses that we looked at when we moved out here, we bought the least expensive one. And I don't regret that for a second. It's so wonderful to be able to look at a bank account balance and to be able to look at your way of life and say, I'm comfortable right here. I'm not stretching myself, and I can do the things that I like to do. Really, really important, really powerful. Unfortunately, this is not the way that our society is going. But once you realize that you don't have any debt and that you are not beholden to anyone because of that debt, it's really powerful. And living 1 degree below your means is definitely a way to get there. So let's sum it up right here. The bottom line, at the end of the day, you ask yourself the question, will you stop living paycheck to paycheck? These are the 8 simple steps. Acknowledge your financial state. Know incoming and outgoing dollars. Cut excess spending. Start saving money now. Focus on paying off debts one by one. Earn additional income however you can. Super, super important. Use half your savings to pay debt and save the other half. And finally, design a budget and stick to it.